Hello everyone. Today I want to continue with the topic of Hamilton versus Jefferson. And more specifically, I wanted to cover the idea of how a Hamiltonian and how a Jeffersonian ideology would look in modern times, right? So before I start, I do want to make clear it's not going to be an apples to apples, one to one, right? Because Hamilton and Jefferson are men of their time, right? Late 1700s, early 1800s. So they would not understand our country, our politics as we know today. But it's an interesting thought experiment to try to transport those ideologies of a Hamiltonian, strong, energetic federal government and a Jeffersonian states' rights type of government, right? So I want to do this thought experiment in looking into modern or contemporary precedents and how would they look like today. What would be good examples of Hamilton and Jeffersonian for the time, all right? So let's get started. Okay, so to start off, what does it mean to be Hamiltonian? What does it mean to be Jeffersonian? So Hamiltonian is a person who wants to put a lot of faith in the government, right? You give government a lot of power to do a lot of things on behalf of the people. An energetic government, the way Hamilton described it, right? Jeffersonian, on the other hand, would mean someone who doesn't trust the government a lot, right? Or someone who wants to put the power back in the states or the local governance as opposed to the federal government, right? So that's what it means to be Hamiltonian versus Jeffersonian. So who in modern times would be considered Hamiltonian and Jeffersonian? Okay, so for example, in the 1930s, and I know that's not very modern, but it is the prime example. FDR, with the New Deal, he would be considered Hamiltonian, right? The idea of government agencies to create employment, government intervention to fix the economy. So a lot of giving government power, right? And in a lot of ways, FDR redefines this idea of the role of the government, right? Of giving more power to the government, this expansion of the government's power to to do a lot for the people, right? So that would be Hamiltonian, right? Also in the 60s, Lyndon B. Johnson would be another example, right? In the late 60s, with the Great Society, Lyndon Johnson exemplifies the idea of government expansion to create this vast welfare system, right? Medicaid, Medicare, all the different social programs that are associated through government control, right? So these two would be good examples of what is a Hamiltonian in the modern days. So who would be considered Jeffersonian? The first president that comes to mind is Ronald Reagan, right? So Ronald Reagan would be considered Jeffersonian because of his mentality of small government, of reducing taxes, of giving power back to the states, deregulation, and that would be very Jeffersonian, right? The idea of you don't want to have big time government, that you want to have more power to the states, deregulation, and that's what makes Ronald Reagan a Jeffersonian president. All right. So one more time, these are not meant to be one to one because it's going to be impossible. The times are very different, right? But I think it's an interesting thought experiment into considering who would be considered Hamiltonian, who would be considered Jeffersonian in modern times. All right. So another important thing to consider is why small time government versus why big time government, right? So why some people favor one over the other. So the idea of a big time government is that sometimes government intervention is needed in case of emergencies, kind of like big inflation or during the depression or to attack poverty. Those kind of things is when people consider the idea of big time government, right? You need a lot of government intervention to act on behalf of the people, right? So why do people don't like the idea of big time government, right? Because big time government can sometimes also become tyrannical. And that is the fear of Jefferson, right? He doesn't like the idea of big time government because in a lot of ways he does not trust the government, right? He would rather spread the power apart between the national government and the federal government, right? So Jeffersonians are people who kind of like don't trust a lot I don't know if the intentions of the government or the capacity of the government to actually act on behalf of the people. So they would rather have states and the actual people take care of this matters rather than the government, right? Another thing, it's also important to bear in mind that modern presidents are rarely going to be 100% Hamiltonian or 100% Jeffersonian. These are very different times. So for the most part, most of them are going to be a mix of one and the other, depending on the issues. Times are very different, and it's very difficult to just be Hamiltonian, just be Jeffersonian. I chose these examples because they are the most, I think they're the most clear examples of, the same philosophy of the 1800s of being a Jeffersonian or being a Hamiltonian. This would be the precedent that, would be attached to those philosophies, right? This is all I have for y'all today. Also, let me know, what do you think? What is the best form of government in your mind? The idea of, Hamiltonian in this very energetic form of government, or this Jeffersonian, all right? Like he said, the government that governs least governs best, all right? So let me know what you think. I'll see you guys later. Be safe, okay? See you.